Bill Tallitsch. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's remarkably close. Tallitsch, yeah.
Tallitsch. Bill
Tallitsch,
Tallitsch
Tallitsch.
of Humanoid FX out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And I have to
That's
say,
right.
Bill, I found you via the Axe YouTube channel,
Sure.
and he did a review of one of your pedals, and I said, "Oh man, the Axe is from North Carolina, cool." And then I said, "Oh, this guy who makes these pedals is from North Carolina.
Yeah.
I'm in North Carolina, and I'm constantly blown away at how many North Carolina amp producers, guitar,
Yeah.
producers, and now effects pedals. It's awesome."
There's a lot more than I realized. Even a few years ago, there was more than I thought. And then this past fall, early November, I was one of the vendors at like a pedal pop-up, right? Here in Raleigh, and it was great because I'm in like Northeast. This was downtown, and there was people from Durham. There's a pedal and amp maker called Dusky Amps. He's from Durham. He was there. There's also Alexander Pedals.
Wow.
Of course, he's the bigger, name, which actually I use, and I can go into more of this. There's so much to talk about, man. It's crazy because this area, I actually had somebody else reaching out to me. Who do you use for this, that, and the other? Well, actually, it's the Disaster Area Manufacturing, which is there's a Disaster Area Designs, which does utility pedals, but that's like a sub company of Alexander Pedals, right?
Okay.
And so that's his machine shop. So all of us use his shop for manufacturing in the area, and they're in like Garner. Yeah. So it's the Alexander Pedal shop.
Yeah, and I was wondering, it's after, and I don't, I'm a guitar player and I'm a tech, but I know very little about pedals. All I know is what I've tested out and plugged in on my own rig.
I guarantee you, and this goes for anybody else. Okay, when I first started learning schematics, I thought that they were, and this was 25 years ago. But that's another story. But I guarantee you know way more than you already do, because when I was 12, was when I first started taking out the pickups. I was like, I know I need to change this out or whatever, tinkering, taking stuff apart. My only guitar that was electric, I had this classical acoustic that I started on.
Well, there you go. And it's funny, I had a Sears Les Paul that I bought in 1980, and I wanted to dive into pedals. I was a huge Brian May, Queen fan.
Oh, sure.
Hendrix, Jeff Beck. I wanted funkier sounds than what I was getting out of my Sears rig. So I went to this music store, and I'm like, well, all I have is $50. What can I get? And I ended up getting this Boss Phaser, and it was, literally after a week, I got really bored with it. Why did I even buy this? I would never use phasing.
Yeah, which is funny because that's actually one of those pedals that I've bought and gotten rid of multiple times. So there's certain distortions and overdrives and other things. Choruses and phasers have been ones that I've gotten rid of and repurchased because I like them, but you only use them for a few minutes. And actually, my buddy just gave me a phaser pedal, because he was like, "Oh yeah, I turn it on and I use it for a few minutes, and then that's whatever." And I'm like, "Well," and I said, "Well, that's what Pink Floyd did too."
Well, that's a very good point.
They only used it for every, whatever dozen songs. They would use it for a couple minutes. And I'm like, so here it is. It's this is one of my, here, I've got a pedal, one pedal board, but this is the dollar store vintage phase.
Nice. And I see a couple of your pedals in there, the Goblin and.
Yeah, this is one of the old Goblins. This is my last, like, I guess you would call it a script Goblin or whatever, because it's just text, the text only version. Because I have two art versions of the with the actual artwork, right? And I'll show you other stuff. But then this is like was a prototype. Well, it was a mistake for the entity, right? And it actually has a clip switch.
That looks like Edgar Allan Poe on the graphics there. Is that who that's supposed to be?
This is some Poe-esque artwork because my son actually had did an illustration which looked remarkably similar to that, and I said to my buddy at the time, who's different artist than the one that I use now, but at the time, because that's one of my older pedals, and I said, yeah, can you make an illustration version of this? Just make it like, you know, better than I could do in Illustrator as quick as I wanted to make it, you know, and yeah, I got it together and it was great. And I did multiple versions of that. I've got a smaller, that's a 125B with top jacks version. That's, and I don't make that anymore. There's a 159B version and I have that. Where is it?
Am I assuming, Bill, that side jacks are more prominent now because you're doing side by side on a pedal board?
Well, that's actually not necessarily the case, because if you have like this is the smaller version, right?
Yeah,
just side jacks. The other one had the top jacks, but that's not always the case. This is like one of those coding, you know, like preference things, spaces versus tabs, or like side jacks versus top jacks. It's very much a preference thing. Actually, on the pedal board, and here it is. Yeah, here's the encounter. This is the newest pedal, and this has top jacks, you know.
Yeah.
But this is the newest this is a delay with modulation, and it also, because of that modulation, and depending how you put this delay and how you have, like, with the feedback, you could turn all the modulation stuff off and then have it sound kind of like a slapback reverb, or like a, you know, an echo.
Nice.
An echo, and then you can have it without the feedback sound like a vibrato or a chorus. And then actually on the repeats, if you adjust, there's the wave and the speed and the depth here, and it can actually modulate over an octave. Plus you have up here is an LED which shows you, not only does it blink with the speed, which is, you know, of your modulation in the repeats, which is separate from the delay. It's a different speed, right? Because you could have that thing going crazy, right?
Yeah.
That shows, it also shows you the brightness. It will pulsate with how intense the modulation is, plus the speed, so that's a separate sort of thing there.
We've already unpacked a couple of the biggest questions that I have for you, and explain like on 5, please. One of them is, would it be prudent or economically prudent to make your pedals in 2 variations, side by side or top? Is that something that you've seen done in the pedal industry before? Like, suddenly players have options in case their pedal board can only handle so much. Why does it vary?
Most of it is to do with how much of the controls are there. Right, how much space would be left for foot switches, and then the jacks, and the smaller version. This is the apparition, but like for this version, this was a tight fit because you got these jacks. Now those have to be lower, and these are the type that are not. And it also depends on how the board is assembled. These and almost all of them right now. None of my you know, the jacks are on the board. They're all just separate, wired separate, right? So these are the nice, like, Nutric, the Reen Nutric, like the kind that you would get on like an ultra American Stratocaster for your output jack. They only cost $2 or whatever. But so there's also not a lot of vertical space. Okay,
gotcha.
But in this, there's more vertical space. So now this versus this is sort of the reason also. Yeah, you see how there's like a lot less vertical space.
Definitely.
So now there's room for these jacks to be behind the pots, the potentiometers. So that's why, and this has 6 knobs, you know, and this has 4, and this is a tight fit for 4 2 rows of 2 side by side.
So when you're constructing the circuit board and the knob placement and all that, are you keeping in mind the most compact, streamlined? You've got the end product in mind, so I need to rearrange everything to fit that space.
Yeah, like for the Goblin, that's 3 knobs, and for the next one, I want it to have there's actually a bias internally, and it's not something that you would really mess with which is why I didn't have it be like an external thing, but also that would have made it 4 knobs. The so that could be an external knob. I think if I do the next version of the Goblin, it'd be 5 knobs, right?
Okay.
Because I want to also add, people have been asking for like a tone knob.
It's interesting. So when you keep that signature in mind, what the end product is going to be, height, width, depth, like one of my favorite pedals was the JHS Ice T. And now that you're mentioning adding knobs, there were 3 versions of the Ice T. Sweet Tea, the GHS Sweet Tea. And man, wow, I love that pedal.
Sure.
But the array was so freaking intense. And it's like, really, is this the best they could do with the signature? I mean, is it something you guys are a slave to? Like, all right, this is going to have to be a big pedal just because of the components that I've.
Sometimes, yeah, that's what it is. It's going to be a big pedal. So overdrives and distortions can usually be pretty small because they have less components. Phase, anything with modulation, phase, well, not anything. A tremolo can be small, but if you have like a phaser or a flanger or like a chorus, and you want it to be all analog, if it's going to have multiple chips and it's going to be like big. Delays like this has the delay. I'm using the older style, it's a taller chip. It's the PT2399. It's the old antiquated delay. It's digital in that it takes a sample, but everything else totally analog. Some is surface mount, just for the resistors and caps. Well, not all the resistors and caps, but there's all the electrolyticals, all the pots. There's the trim pot. There's like multiple other diodes, plus the Vactrol that I hand roll. All these other things are through hole. So there's a lot of extra work that goes into this one. Plus, and this one's separate. This one's separate also because it's we're doing a partnership with Cybernetic Sound, which is a nonprofit out of Atlanta, Georgia.
Nice.
And they provide prosthetics for musicians to be able to get back and play who have like lost limbs or done something.
Wow.
It has a disability in some way or some other.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so accessibility issues with this. I mean, this is the good thing with this, is that a lot of the things that are with guitar pedals in general are just step on like a switch or just like a knob. And actually, I know that some of them with the bigger knobs, it's nice because you can use. I think that was the reason why Analog Man for the Prince of Tone is why he said that. That's why he wanted the small. Actually, I have a clone of that I made. So the 2 big knobs up here, like for volume and specifically for the gain, would be, and he uses the big MXR types. These are like these big cupcake types, just on the clone that I made. But and same thing with this is the same way with Boss pedals. You can roll it with your foot.
Sure.
Yeah, the side. Any of these big fuzzes too. What I mean.
Ergonomically, I always enjoy being able to do that instead of having to squat down and take a look at what you're doing next.
Yeah, and then for a stomp box, you can literally, if you want to hit it, if you want to, whatever you want to do, just to hit it, just to get the switch to hit.
Yeah, exactly.
You can press it. Lots of people have something set up above their amp so that they could just press it with their fingers, or you just slap it real quick, or you got like a lot of times. People have like a nice like switchboard, and then they never have to touch the pedals.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Which is great, because one of the things I want to come out with is like a dual effects loop, which will just be like a cheap utility pedal.
Cool.
All this comes down to like not being able to do it. It's like the artwork, the time. It's just me making stuff. I have, and then our artist Dale, who all of the line currently right now, with the exception of that old text Goblin. Everything else is done by him on the site. All the pedals currently, and there's a bunch of new stuff coming out.
I have to say that your aesthetic and your graphics are super cool. It's got a Pulp Fiction-y kind of retro graphic novel. The apparition's beautiful.
Well, this is the new. This is with red hair version. I sold one version like with the blue hair,
like a limited edition. Yeah.
Sort of, I only made one, but I do have, there's other ones that I built that I have somewhere.
And I'm checking out your site right now, Humanoid FX, FX, the letters FX, humanoidfx.com. You have You have a lineup of what, 5 pedals. What if you had to everything from modulation? You've got pretty much the good standards covered.
Yeah, there's overdrive, distortion. There's 2 fuzzes,
and a delay.
And that's because the Goblin is unique because it has a gain, so you can turn that down.
Nice.
And then you can turn the fuzz down, and it kind of acts like it's an overdrive at that point. Cool. So you can push your amp, and then you can just slowly dial in the fuzz a little bit because it uses these 2 transistors. And
I love the retro knob that you have on the Ghoul too. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's actually hard to find that one in that size. That's the smallest that they make in that size. I have all these other like bigger ones. Here's a boost that I did, which I might do something. Nice. And so this is more like this is a bigger one.
That's awesome.
And they make them even bigger than that. So this is more like the EQD, like Acapulco Gold, or the what's the other one called, the Eruptor that had the lava, or like a lot of these other ones, they're just a big huge knob. Tons of other companies are and it's fine. I didn't want to have to do just a giant pedal for one knob, so that's why I wanted to do this. But just to so it doesn't cover up the label and then the artwork. You don't want it to be like too big on a small.
And the Ghoul seems like your smallest signature, right? Smallest.
Well, the Goblin is the same size, actually. It's got side jacks, and then the Entity currently, but this is the new version of the Entity, and this is
beautiful,
like a rainbow sparkle. If you take a look at this,
that's totally cool.
But it's got kind of like a ghost astronaut guy, and it's going to have more knobs plus a clip switch. But this was a prototype. There's going to be the LED next to the foot switch, and then this middle, which was going to be an LED. We're actually that's going to get moved. Oh yeah, because it's going to be, I think by the volume, it's going to get moved over to like under the drive there.
You could make the LEDs as eyes.
That's true. Yeah, this one has LED clipping, so that is a possibility, and that means I could do a version because right now it requires it requires red color LEDs because it's like a speed. The reds are the fastest. Right.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's interesting to talk, but that's why you can get the highest like gain because it clips the fastest with a lot of these. But there's it's not just those. It really depends on the circuit because there's also the Rat, clips super hard and it doesn't use LEDs originally. So it's not like it does. It's not like it needs that, you know what I mean? But it's a very, 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 it's audible, but it's a small difference, you know what I mean? But
the Rat turned into my second favorite pedal after the phaser. When I got rid of that Boss phaser, I went out and got a Rat pedal, and that was like, okay, this is the way my Sears amplifier should sound.
Plus Jeff Beck was using a Rat.
Right,
and the same thing, like I said, how you could turn it all the way down. There's you could just dial it in slightly, ever so slightly, with the touch of
perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
We need to go back to the beginning because I'd like to hear how a pedal designer got into it. Were you tired of buying pedals and thought, you know what, I have basic soldering skills, I can make my own? How did it start?
Yeah, that was some of it. Was like, I didn't have as much of a knowledge of pedals when I was younger, when I was just practicing guitar and playing all the time. Right. The first pedal I ever got was a wah pedal. I saved up or got help, or I don't know what it was, or a present or whatever and it was a Dunlop Crybaby, just whatever the basic standard. And this was 1994, right? Or 3 or whatever it was, 93 or 4. So there weren't so many versions. And I was like, well, Kirk Hammett uses the Crybaby. So I'll use the Crybaby. Well, everybody used the Crybaby. So anyways, but then I used that for a while. For a long, I still have it. It's actually, my son's using it upstairs right now, which is a very cool thing. But then I had a solid state amp. And I didn't know all about all this. So this was the thing, is that I didn't know all about the gear. I knew about guitars and the pickups and all that stuff. So that's why I was all tinkering it. And I taught myself how to solder. Went to Radio Shack because there was one right there in town, and you could just buy a soldering iron. And it was I can't believe I didn't like burn myself really with this. It was just a big plastic gun handle.
Oh God.
And it was just a straight 2-prong plug into the wall.
Oh,
and that was it. There was no temperature, and you just set it onto it, like it came with this crappy little just thing you set it on,
like the holster.
It didn't even go in. It's something. It just, you like set it, you like rested it onto the, you'd have to set it onto this thing.
That's a fire waiting to happen.
Yeah, it was terrible. But so I was changing pickups because somebody had some kind of pickup, and I had an electric guitar, and then somebody gave me an electric guitar body that was like a blank, unfinished body with a neck. And I was like, this is awesome. It was like a totally blank thing. And I don't know where they got this, because this was like 95, 94 or something. Wow. And like, it was a neck and a body, and it was like a Jackson, like offset V, like Rhodes body.
Okay.
But this was all some crappy, whatever bass was. I don't know what it was. And it was, and so I built this guitar, and it was cool. And then but I was always like, I want to change the neck pickup in this one. I don't like it or whatever. And then I got another guitar, and that was nice, and it was brand new. And then so I changed the pickup in the neck and I kept the bridge, everything else I kept on it. So then it was like, I got more confident with like modifying like real stuff, but cool. But I didn't know about amps and all that stuff. I knew that like to get, like a nice amp was expensive, and I got a nice amp, but it turned out that it was this Marshall, valve state, so it wasn't really like a tube amp, it was a solid state amp. So but again, it wasn't until I didn't really do anything with guitar related stuff. I'm a software engineer, by trade, mostly, but it was whatever, 5 years ago, it's 6-7 years ago, I was like really just deep diving into like all the circuits, all the whatever. And then I started making all the stuff just on my own. And I started getting back into playing guitar like a lot and building the stuff.
What was your first go at a pedal? What did you want to do with it? And what did you end up doing?
I really wanted to build the Governor, or like the Valvitzer is what it was going around for a long time, before there was all these like clone sites and all that where you could buy this. So a long time ago, I had the schematic and everything, and I just was hanging on to it forever. But my wife bought me a kit. She finally was just like, here, I got something for my Christmas or my birthday, right?
And when was this? What year was this?
Whoops. So I had it for a while before I had the confidence to, like, I started doing something, but before because I didn't have have a good soldering iron, and so I needed to re-get stuff over time. I did, but this was it. This was from, I guess, and the labels worn. This was this is a transistor overdrive called the Thunder Drive, and this would just be from one of the, what is it, the amplified parts or whatever that site is.
Okay.
And they make a number of these kits, and these kits are wonderful because they have everything you need, and they're pretty affordable, and it's the real kind of classic way that pedals are made.
You guys deal in so many different parts and diodes and capacitors that I would not be surprised if you had an encyclopedic knowledge that you forget.
Well, I've got a ton. It's just called like a ringlet board or a ringlet strip, eyelet strip or whatever it's called.
Or like a breadboard kind of a thing?
Sort of. It's just got, I have a bunch of these. I don't even know why. And then now I want to show one. I don't have one. It's just it's just like rings, like lugs. And then it's got like a strip and then a part where you can screw it in. And some of them are longer and shorter. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 5 or 4 or 6, or, they come in different sizes. But you can, connect all the multiple things to it. And I've done multiple circuits this way. And this one is just a basic, you've got your level and your gain. And it's, level and overdrive or whatever, and it's, but so it took me a while before I finally built it. And then I did a terrible job because I hadn't soldered anything in like forever. So then I like redid it. And then later on, I got a cheap soldering iron off of Amazon. And then I started I was like, I'm going to do this thing. And then I'm going to do these other ones too. You know, these
for yourself, only for yourself. You weren't thinking retail. You weren't thinking my own company.
No, because I got a job and I still have a job, but and that's why I don't crank out as much as I can, right? Because I'm mainly doing stuff on like weekends, whatever, late afternoons, evenings, whenever I'm off. Like,
so Bill, you've been doing it. I went on your Instagram, and your very first post was in 2022, and it was this big basic box with 3 knobs and an input.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't even describe in the post what the hell it was. But that was probably the launching pad of, you know what, maybe I can start going commercial with this.
There were a number that I sold like that, and then
where were you selling them?
I kept that one, either on Reverb or eBay.
Okay.
And then I got a circuit board made, and then I started doing a number of different versions with that sort of thing, and I just never really liked it all that much as far as the way that the circuit board was, and then how it was coming out with what I was doing for the layout of the like art and with the whatever. And then eventually I got hooked up with like an illustrator, started making some better looking stuff, and I was getting some face plates, but I was doing the Goblin as I had made that, just laid it out with text and was making that. So it sort of evolved into like, well, I'm making so many of these that I just really like doing it. And instead of doing the kits, I was like, I want to have my own overdrive,
Nice.
And I was like, yeah, I'd rather do, and then I could just start selling some of those. And the original idea was just to do some face plates, just do it occasionally, sell them, and then I was thinking, well, maybe I'll get set up like I saw this one guy was doing this really nice. He was doing screen prints. Like he had a big screen, and he had all these different pedal designs.
Wow.
And he was just doing, and I was like, that seems nice because I don't have to worry about anything. I'm just at home, whatever. I could get them drilled, and then I just do the screen prints or whatever. But then I went around to a number of different places locally. Turns out you need to just get everything online, basically, because I went to some places locally and they said screen printing, all this and that. And I was like, well, can you make me a screen? I've got this other, kind of design, this and that. And they were like, no, we order them out with all this. And I'm like, man, so you're telling me so I never got around to doing the screen printing, because then I would have needed to make the jig and do and get all set up and get all set up for all of it. And by that point I was already set up with, or I at least had gotten pointed towards the guy that was making nice face plates and then doing UV printing and the drilling and all that stuff, and in Portland. And then I switched to I was doing some of this stuff online. There's a place overseas that you can get, a lot of people use, where you can get your components, and that's called Tata, and they're great, but it takes forever, and you have to have the very specific palette and everything in Illustrator. You can't use the other program for. Anyways, the whole point is that I ended, you do all these things, and I wish I did some stuff differently, but the trial and error, eventually you land on a place, and I found the guy local, the disaster area is local, and they're actually cheaper than with Portland and all that. Anyways, and I didn't have to deal with like they do everything. I didn't have to do faceplate. Not that I had to deal with faceplates, but I thought they could be cool and kind of retro for some. And so to answer your earlier question, I was doing some where I had like the Goblin with the top jacks. They weren't selling as well, I guess. Maybe it was the colors. I don't know what it was. Because when I show stuff of the inside the circuit, there's barely anything in there. And I'm like, well, I got all this room. You might as well just do it in the smaller one, because more people want more compact space so that there's more room for pedals on the pedal board. Right. But I'm still doing those completely through hole soldering, so they take some extra time. And I'm like, well, I'll just do them, and there's no reason to do the big the big 125B enclosure. There's no reason. But anyways, I started being, so I just kept making more and more pedals that were like for myself.
So the Ghoul was the first time you said, you know what, I think I'm going to mass produce a pedal, create a company.
No, that was the
I'm sorry, the Goblin.
Yeah,
yes.
The Goblin was the one that the Overdrive before that I was calling like the Exceptional Overdrive or whatever.
Okay.
And I was just like,
I saw that one on your Instagram.
Yeah, I still have a few of them laying around. I don't like the way that they look, and I do, etc. So it just, I wasn't very focused on what I wanted to. I just was like, I'm going to make an Overdrive, and kind of for myself, just to be able to make multiples, see how I can make it sound and whatever.
So that's your go-to amplifier when testing your pedals out.
This is this is kind of my main go-to right now for everything. Although upstairs, like I said, I've got just set up in my, kind of room is a I have a Fender Princeton, like a vintage Fender Princeton. That's that runs in our family. It's from 1965. Anyways, yeah.
Well, so Bill, I start wondering about the pedal industry and boutique portion of it are huge. I mean, they're blowing up. You'll always see new designs popping up left and right. Sure. Is it a highly protected realm? You can't patent. Can you patent a pedal idea? Is that even possible? Because all you need to do is pop the top off and the components are all out there for everybody. You just need to configure the components in a certain way to get your quote unquote final product.
I mean, you can kind of patent the idea, I guess, if you wanted to. More like you'd probably copyright the thought or idea with like your logo name, if this is your, but the circuit itself, like, no, you can't, especially with these basic audio circuits. There's nothing proprietary about any of this. You buy all these parts, unless you made your own chip that did something different than a regular like single or dual channel quad, operational amplifier. All you're trying to do is amplify the signal to get it to line level. Is like the first thing, right? Is not the first thing, but the first basic thing you want to get it to do.
Okay.
Right? If you wanted to build the Electro Harmonics LPB1 or whatever, the line linear power boost, that just gets your signal to line level. That's all it does.
Okay.
Right? It's just a boost. It doesn't do anything. You just put it in and you turn it on, puts it up to line level. So you can have that be like where you could basically put that in and go a line in after that pedal, after that pedal. But it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have EQ, doesn't have gain. And all you're doing is using, so basically all these other modern, overdrives, etc., distortion pedals are all based off of that basic premise. After everything is built on top of that, so like I mean,
gotcha.
And so this is where it comes into where now you'll learn something more than what you didn't even already know. You've already got your signal that goes in and out, and it needs some power because you're going to basically power up the component that brings it up to the line level, right? And so essentially, and then of course your LED when you're on off status, whatever other stuff, but but basically a solid state amplifier, okay, and a tube amplifier to some extent is the same premise, right? So if you get like some of these where it's like an amp in a box, though it sounds just like a JCM or Mesa Boogie, whatever, the AC boost, the Joyo pedals or whatever. It sounds like an AC30. Okay, so that's fine. That's the same schematic, essentially, circuit design that the AC30 has in its preamp stage. And all they did was make it the smaller components for the pedal. And it doesn't, the only difference is that it's a preamp and it's not, of course, well, not the only difference. The main difference is that it's just 9-volt, right? It's just powered. It's a pedal. You plug it in and out, and it sounds like an AC30. Okay, that's the main premise. Well, so that's got like a chip inside, or two. I can't remember what that one has. But that chip is the replacement, since it's amplifying the sound, it's a replacement of either multiple transistors or in an actual amplifier, the AC30, the actual preamp tubes, right? So there's no need for the tubes because it doesn't use those for clipping and then it's using either the diodes like red LEDs or whatever type of LEDs, or I'm sorry, whatever type of diodes, plus an operational amplifier or transistors to amplify the signal to line level, and all that stuff is replacing what the vacuum tubes are doing, the 12AX7s or whatever. And then, but then an actual amplifier would go into a power section. It would go into your output section, all that stuff, which would, now you've got transformers and you've got your, all that stuff to boost the, that's why you can get one of those orange tiny, the box. That's like a 15 watt amplifier, right? That's a power. That is technically like a preamp with a power amp. So you could actually go straight to an external cab with that from your pedal board. That's what all these ampless rigs are. People are trying to do, But the main point is that the premise of this preamp itself is just the preamp section of the bigger amplifier. Most of these people have already been building these into these pedals. They sound like a Mesa Boogie, sounds like a Randall, sounds like an EVH, sounds like a whatever, That's the bit, and so it's the same kind of basic circuitry, except you're using, quarter watt capacitor resistors instead of big, whatever, depending on if it's 100 watt,
Do you have other pedal guys? Is the pedal community? Did you guys reach out to each other and say, "Hey, how did you get that effect?" Or "What are you doing here?" Or do you have any suggestions on how I can approach this pedal? Do you guys share information like that, or
some of that
is pretty tight to the vest?
No, it's not. I mean, I don't go into too much detail with what I say I've shared schematics with people, but there's a couple of guys I talked to, and I think I showed you one of those was like an RD FX. I talked to him, and he's helped me a bunch in the beginning. Most of it was on Instagram a lot. Like I talked to Haunted Labs. I talked to there's a number of other companies and people that I talked to where I was chatting with the guy from the TAL audio, audio effect plugins that you can get. And then he was also making this chorus at the time, and I was chatting with him a lot, and a number of other people, and everybody has been really cool, especially when there's like a new creator around. They like the name of I mean, that's a lot of it was that like
branding.
The branding. And then once you start to have something that kind of looks a little more professional, and they start to realize, oh, you're not just slapping things together with no art and just like kind of like I did in the beginning,
Yeah.
But if you start to where it's like you're trying to do something with it, which most of these guys, everybody's doing it mainly in their free time, or
sure,
I mean, there's a lot of like it is possible with time and effort, and hopefully, with everything I'm doing, with longer form content on YouTube, and then podcasting on my own, and then, other podcasts that are willing to have me, and then other sort of collaborations that I'm doing with, I have other, there's some other YouTuber type people that I've, and anyways, there's, so I'm trying to connect with other local musicians, let's try to get some of my pedals into like some of the local like recording studios, just to kind of have there. And it's like, oh, if some people are using stuff, they want to use a overdrive, or they want to use a distortion pedal, they got their choice of a few, and they say, oh, this one's local, and then maybe they'll try it or whatever.
Your Instagram does highlight a few local musicians, I can tell.
Yeah, there's a few.
You're having them plug in and playing through it, and here's what it does.
Yeah, and the problem is not really what I'm doing so much. It's like how often, and this is the biggest thing, is what the social media has to offer, is that there's so much competition, and the social media just in general, it's not like this community is real. It's actually opening and welcoming to newcomers. Has nothing to do with it's more like the social media itself is like, you need to post so much and be so, even if you do the same thing as anybody else, right? Which is arguably like what I do, what a lot of people do with guitar / pedals / gear is all. I mean, it's all been kind of done, unless it's a new pedal or something. That's the other thing is, oh, here's the new whatever. But it's not like if I do a guitar demo, pickup demo, or whatever, anybody's ever heard anything. They've heard this amp a million times, but they've not heard my pedal through the amp, and that's where the other thing is. I want to show my pedal through different
setups.
Different setup. You don't even have to know how social media works. You just have to know how advertising works. Is like the reason why Coke and Pepsi is number one is because they're just advertising so much,
right,
that you're just sick of hearing and seeing about them everywhere. And every time you turn, or the radio, any feeds, whatever. So that's the thing, is you have to be, posting so much
saturation
across it. Yeah. So I mean, it's time and effort to do all that stuff, which is why these bands and real companies hire somebody full time, because it's a lot of work.
Have you thought, and being the case, the next dream, I guess some pedal makers out there would want to break into the large retail, Musician's Friend, Sweetwater. Have you thought about that? Have you heard stories of how a pedal boutique guy went to the next? Is that considered the next level? Do you want to keep it grassroots?
I guess that's sort of the next level. I guess the final level would really be you've got not just Sweetwater, but you've got the Guitar Centers,
right?
Have you where it's a product that's just carried by them in all their stores, which God, I mean, who knows how much longer Guitar Center is gonna,
right?
Sam Ash just went away. There was the one that was almost across the street from the Guitar Center here in Raleigh, and that one went away. And there wasn't all that much in there when I was. It's not like it was laid out very well either when I was in there. It was kind of a weird, depressing sort of, at least for this one that I went into. The Guitar Center is fine, but it's actually smaller than it looks, at least on this area here. But there's some other great music retailers in the around, and I think that the goal. So I do have some wholesaling, and it's a lot of work to keep up with the inventory with all these guys, with all the different. When I'm not offering something or something new, I need to let them all know. So the wholesaling stuff is a little bit of a pain, and I guess the goal would to be bigger and more well known and offer a lot of variety. If you're bigger, here's a company that's known within our is like a Walrus Audio, or something where they're not JHS or Boss, where everybody knows about them, but they're in tons of retail. Okay. Even if I was small, a little bit smaller, let's say Old Blood Noise Endeavors, right? You can still find a ton of their stuff on Amazon. And I guess, so the next big thing would be to get to be at that level of where you're just one of the pedals that comes up on Amazon also. So that you have to have a lot more, there's a lot more steps involved to be able to be involved with that. Or you could get hooked up with being, and you do have to
an affiliate program, this one musician who's well known really, really digs my pedals. And
that's another thing too. Yeah. If you can get a signature thing with their sign off, and you get them to do the commercial with it, and you get to do all that. That's a whole separate thing. You can also
have you thought about that, Bill? Have you thought about reaching out to someone saying, hey, can I be your go-to guy? I'll give you my pedals at 50 off, or
I mean, I do have a creator program on, because I use Shopify for my site, and there's a whole thing where I have it all set up where I set up, there was a YouTuber and there was a creator code with him and he's pushing the pedals, and then he gets a percentage.
One of my favorite posts that you did was you took a shaving kit box and made a pedal board out of it.
I just did that. Yeah,
Harry's Shaving Club or whatever.
Yeah, the Harry's. And then look at this one. This was,
and you don't have to be expensive. It's a perfectly functional. There you go, pedal power.
This was from the one pedal power, and look at this.
There you go. Yeah,
look at this. It's got 3 pedals in it, and then instead of having a whole power supply, you could, if you're just practicing or whatever, you could use the daisy chain.
Here's the
daisy chain thing if you want, but I don't condone that. But I will say, and for this version, I will say that I would maybe have to poke a hole in the back, and then maybe I could fit another one in here, maybe with the other ones, if I wanted to poke some holes in the side. But if you don't want to, and if you got a a guitar cable that has a side, you know, like an angle, right angle jack. You could do that. But I did, and if you put the like a little Velcro up here, this other pedal.
That's a dual layer board. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Can you imagine selling those on Etsy?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But this thing was so it was very thin and small. It only takes a USB 5 volts power needed to power the pedal supply in order to provide like 6 9-volt 100 milliamp isolated outputs. And this thing, but it's so tiny that you can just put it in here and it's real thin. It's not like a big clunky brick.
Cool. Always tinkering.
Yeah. And I actually just built a new, and then you'll see a post soon. I just built a wooden pedal board.
Right? Oh, nice. Cool.
And all you need is some a 1x3, just the regular, whatever it costs for a couple bucks at Home Depot for the one size. You don't need to get the type that goes by the foot. Just get the cheap, whatever it is, birch or something. And then a couple of 1x2s, you know, and then you can make a few pedal boards out of it, because this one just uses 4 16-inch like 1x2s.
There you go.
And then when you build the sides, you know, so those 4, that takes up almost one of those 1x2s that you can buy. So if you buy 2 of those 1x2s, then you can make one that's another one that's got like like a single row that's maybe longer or whatever.
Nice.
Anyways, it's all you got to do is fasten it together, spray paint it, and then just get yourself a big thing of these.
The Velcro.
Yeah, the Velcro costs $5 on Amazon, $6 or something for like 10 feet of both sides of the pedal board stuff.
What's next on your radar?
Well, I've got, and I have all the stuff that this is further down, but I am gonna be building some kind of, you know, some basically amp heads to order, right? So those are tube amp heads. I have I have a tube amp layout. I have the whole schematic, everything all set. I just have to finish laying it out on for the circuit board. Whoa. And then I've got it all set up for the off board. You know, I've got all the tubes, I've got all the tube sockets, all that stuff for outboard.
How many watts? How many watts are you going to go?
It's a 50 watt, right?
Okay.
But you can also there's going to be a switch on the back where you can drop the power down to, like, you know, whatever, 5 or 8 watts.
Wow, man! So you're getting into a whole new realm.
But that'll be kind of made to order, because these aren't going to be super cheap, but they're also not going to be, you know, crazy boutique like
pricing,
you know, $5,000 or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. But then also I've got these other pedals coming out. I mentioned the one utility. There's the new apparition and the new entity, as far as those with the new designs.
Nice.
There's a couple other things that I want to nothing that I can announce, except that there's I used to have a delay only. That was the Shadows delay.
Oh,
and we're going to bring that back. So that's
very cool.
New artwork. Yeah. So that's people have asked about that. There's going to be new art. And then some other stuff, you know, but like probably another more basic, maybe smaller overdrive, and another smaller, maybe distortion. Cool. But then there will be the bigger ones. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with those. I think I want to have the overdrive. It might actually be more like that, plus I might do one that's actually the preamp in the box, like the actual preamp pedal, where it's the same sort of thing. It's going to be emulated off of the tube amp that I'm making, where all you need to do is just go straight into like a cab sim.
Very cool.
If you want to have like an ampless rig or something like that.
Very cool.
We'll see a couple of things like that are options. There might be a compact version or a bigger version of that with all the controls, or either way, like there will probably end up being just kind of a preamp only version of that. You know, where it sounds like the tube amp, right? Where it's emulated off that same switch.
Nice.
And then there might even be where I might even make the preamp box version. You know, you see some of these and it's like a big box, and it's actually got like a couple of tubes.
This is a cool interview because I have a standard 10 question ask that I ask. I'm going to start asking in season 2.
Sure.
And I originally, when I created it, I had it geared towards guitar players and guitar techs.
Yeah.
So I had to create a whole new one.
Oh no,
for pedal guys. So, and it was fun.
We
it was fun.
We can talk about guitar tech stuff, man. Look, this is a made in Japan Jackson performer.
Oh, very cool, man. Very cool. The reverse headstock. I like. Yeah.
PS4, made in Japan in 1996.
Oh, there you go. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, so we could talk about.
So it was cool because I got to create 10 questions involved with pedals and pedal making, and it was fun to explore what would I ask a pedal guy. So I'm going to dive right in. The final question, number 10, I ask everybody because it's for the love of guitar. And so number 10 is everybody gets that one. But number 1, the one I thought up, what's the wildest effect pedal that you've ever dealt with? Like you purchased it for yourself. You probably gut every pedal that you like. Oh, I wonder how they're making this tick. You know, what would you say the wildest pedal that you've ever messed with would be?
I will say that the wildest would be, something that's probably not as exciting as you would think, right? Right, and that would be, I think this was one of the original kind of made in Japan Boss flangers. What was it? The BF1 or something?
Oh, okay.
Or something, whatever that was.
Okay.
With the big green label with the made in Japan. I don't know if it's anything crazy, but it does a lot of awesome stuff, and it's a great pedal. But I got rid of it because I'm just like, I use this for, like you said in the beginning, like use it a little bit.
Yeah, I saw on YouTube it emulates a Hammond B3 organ.
Oh, sure.
Dude, that was the coolest, but it's got to be like one song and you're done.
Yeah. I will say that I do have, this is the craziest that I do actually have, and this was my wife's.
Oh, nice.
It is hers, but this is,
Sweet.
She plays bass, and this helps with bass, but for guitar,
absolutely.
When I'm playing on this, I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's not
and that's how
not sounding the way that I think I want it to sound.
That's how those bands like Local H and all that, they get a guitarist who has an Octavia or the Black Keys, right? Yeah. If you have an octave, you're set. You don't need a bass player.
I know.
That's my assumption. That's my assumption.
Especially if you're not playing like fast like stuff. Right. If you're just doing and not even chords, but just like
Tony Iommi riffs. And stuff.
It doesn't work with chords though, man. At least that one.
Oof. Yeah, it gets muddy.
No chords, no. And then you can also do I don't know. I think it would be cool to have I do have where I made where there's a problem on one of my older Psychosis pedals that has like a tremolo, and there's a problem with it. And
What's
so
the
now
problem?
It's a problem with the input signal in the with the tremolo, the way it's connecting to. I think I used either way. There's something. So what it's doing now is it's turned into kind of turned into one of those like bit crush where you can spin, and it's almost turned into like a synth pedal, like a pitch generator. So now you can adjust it, and when you're adjusting the tremolo settings, it like goes in like the octaves, and it goes into like a it's almost like an oscillator that you can adjust the pitch.
How often does that happen, Bill, where you run into a mistake and you're like, shit, maybe I should stop here. This is a whole pedal in itself.
Oh, this is the only time. I don't think I'm gonna this is the only time that's happened with that. I wouldn't want to be, if I was gonna do that, which I have thought about, like you're making some possibly in the future, like Euro racks, and I do have some oscillator actual, for building like a synth pedal or a synth so like a sound generator, pitch generator, something like that. But I haven't gotten around to making anything like that yet, though.
Number 2, what's the greatest pedal ever made? Would you say it's the holy grail of pedals?
One of the original delay pedals, because you couldn't do there's tons of overdrives, there's tons of distortions, there's tons of, I think if you're gonna do like I think there's the delay, like once the first like analog delay came out, which is, again, I can't tell you what the exact first.
Man, I'll bet you $1 million Les Paul probably invented it.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm sure it was. Yeah, I mean, there was, of course, the recording techniques that you could use for bouncing through with the tape delay. Yeah, but as far as the first pedal that emulated that, there was the Big Bucket Brigade.
Okay.
You know, the circuit design was how you could do like it was like an Echo. But as far as what was the exact first pedal, I don't remember that did that. That would have been in the 70s. I don't remember. It probably Electro Harmonics did it with the
sure.
Yeah, but so anyways, that probably the delay.
Okay. Number 3, what's the one tool you can't live without? And I suspect I know what the answer to that would be. And originally, I apologize because I had this created for guitar techs because we're all about tools.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to leave it in there. I'm going to see what a pedal guy says.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to have to be the soldering iron.
Absolutely.
But besides the soldering iron, you have to have really, really nice wire clippers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they keep going. Like if you get it, like even with some of the, they just, they dull out. And so you have to keep buying wire clippers.
Sure.
So get a nice pair of wire clippers, you have to buy them less often.
Okay, well there you go.
And a nicer soldering iron. I have a nice Weller, now, but I used to have, this crappy
2-prong into the right.
But now like this thing can get hotter, right? Even hotter.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I have to ask, and I've seen varying answers to this, but what's the optimal temperature for soldering? What do you find is your optimal temperature?
Yeah, I go kind of hot, I guess, a little hotter than they say you're supposed to, but I don't want to hold it for like 5 seconds on every joint right before I apply the solder. So I do have it a bit hotter, and I use the pencil, the sharp like pencil tip, the Weller tips. I was using the hook tips; those are great too. But I need more heat to the very, very tip, and I go at like 760 or 770 or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty hot. I think they say it's supposed to be 580 to 630 or something like that. But I don't know. I was doing like somewhere around 675, and then I ended up pushing it to like 720. I don't know. It just seems to. I'm doing mostly these stupid. For a bunch of the through-hole stuff, it's resistors and caps, so it's like it's not gonna. It doesn't really hurt,
Interesting.
The transistors have pretty thick legs, that I'm using. They're the tin can type,
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they can handle that heat.
Yeah, but I probably should turn it down a little. Maybe I'll turn it down back to around 700 to see.
Wow.
If it, or 685 or something, just to see if it's, or maybe 6. I swear I remember starting on some of the specs, the recommended specs, and it wasn't doing what I wanted. But it could be the tip. Could be the tip.
That's
right. I wasn't using the big flat,
good point.
I'm using the smaller tips, so you kind of need it to be hotter for I don't know.
Well, so number 5, what's the most common mistake a guitarist will make when shopping for a pedal? What do you think? I'm sure you analyze your demographic and shopping habits. You're a guitarist. You buy pedals. You've talked to other guitarists when they shop for pedals and what they're looking for. Like me, my biggest mistake was buying a pedal I thought would be cool.
Yeah.
And I only use it for one song because it's really impractical.
Well, I made that same mistake too when I bought my first, because that amp that I had it didn't do like high gain.
Okay.
So I wanted some higher gain. I didn't know that I should probably have stacked something a little bit different, but I got a like high gain distortion pedal. And then when I was either stacking stuff or using it on the Queen, either way, it just wasn't doing like what I wanted. And I think I just went by like what I thought I needed versus trying out a ton of stuff with, but there wasn't, I wasn't going to lug my big amp. Anyways, either way, it just didn't. I didn't do proper research and everything, and I didn't do proper testing, and I think that's what's happening with probably a lot of people with like these days. You can go on and watch a YouTube video, you know, just to hear how it sounds and all that stuff, but still on your rig that might not, you know, like if I played like a katana boost on my old, you know, my old Marshall valve state, it's probably not going to do anything that I want it to do compared to, you know, either of my actual Fender tube amps now, you know.
And it's interesting because I'm thinking sometimes there are mistakes that you can compensate for. And I'm thinking back to my Morley Wah-Wah, it was a Wah-Wah/volume pedal. And the one thing that I realized, because I'm a huge Hendrix fan, you know, I wanted to do, you know, Voodoo Child Slight Return Till the Cows Come Home. But the one thing that I found I really liked, and I started reading Guitar Player magazine and seeing that guys like Dave Murray for Iron Maiden do this, they'll find that mid position and let it hang there. And you get this completely different kind of a, you know, because I'm a Strat guy too. And Murray's a Strat guy. And it's like, well, son of a gun, I don't need to sit there and wah-wah all the freaking time. I can find these interesting settings. Suddenly your pedal board has this giant Morley wah-wah pedal for just that one purpose. You know?
Sure. And I've played in bands, so I know how it sounds to like have like your setting where it sounds great and you're playing and it's like by yourself or at home or just with you, and then as soon as there's drums and bass, you're like, oh my god, you can't hear any of what I was trying to, the subtle tone, whatever. So you really need to just not worry about like your bass as much, your low mids, like anything below, you know, like 800 you need to like 600, you need to like not worry about like at all. It's not going to be there when you're playing, right, with some actual
real environment, right?
So I've never done that. I know that there are settings you can adjust on the wah pedal, and I do know that there's some great solos that I remember hearing that someone had used the wah pedal and they just left it open, you know, and then slowly maybe dialed it back a little bit, and then put it where they left it, where it was almost like just a
nuance,
like a high pass filter, and they kind of left it open because the way that but they weren't just like, you know, wanking on it the whole time. They weren't just flapping it, you know.
Right.
But I tended to start using it less and less and less. I couldn't get the tone dialed in to some of the specifics. I guess I didn't know that I could do some adjustments on the inside.
Sure, that's right. What's the most underrated pedal, Bill? What's the one that everyone just kind of, you know, and if like the wah set at its mid-range, you've created a whole new, there might be a pedal out there that at the right settings that a lot of people wouldn't realize, you plug this into your lineup, you can get some amazing results.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of people would probably tell you like a compressor, right? Which may be true. You know, there's the EQ pedal because you can do tons and tons of stuff. Plus, if you just leave the EQ, you know, at whatever you do, plus then it becomes a boost. You can usually, it has an output, you know, especially if it's an active EQ and not just like a passive EQ, then you can actually boost the frequencies instead of it where it's just kind of. But the I don't know. It's very interesting I would say.
I have to agree with you on the compressor because I'm a jazz guy, and so many times that compression clips the note just where you want it, so you get more, because I'm like almost a bebop kind of a player, and you get that. You're allowed to be a staccato player when you compress and you take off that back end of the note.
Well, sure, and you can really control the. You can control the attack and the release and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the biggest, you Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you can't really say any of the major the major pedals, right? Because everybody's using all these ones. So what would be underrated? I mean, I don't know. I guess if you're I personally I kind of hate the sound of like a auto wah envelope filter or whatever.
Yeah,
So that's
worst.
me. So I guess I could say that that's kind of underrated for that crowd, but for me, for I'm trying to think of everybody. Like, I don't know. I probably I think every genre guitar can be improved with a compressor. Probably just
that sounds right.
It was the very first thing.
Yeah, great answer. That's a great answer. I'd agree with you on that. If you could give one of your pedals to a legendary guitarist, past or present, which pedal would it be, and which guitarist would it be? And I'm sure you've probably fantasized, like, blah blah blah's tone. If I could just plug one of my, you know what I mean? It would be it'd add to it. It'd take it to the next level.
Some of this really has to do with the tone and the way that the producer and mixer and everybody on these records. Oh my gosh. There's been some of these early 80s, mid 80s heavy metal records that are just terrible sounding quality. And it's nothing like, I'm sure, what they sound like live or whatever, but
so it wouldn't be a fantasy, it'd be a fix for you. It'd be like, oh my God, if they had this, it would so improve where they're going or what they're trying to achieve with this tune.
I will say for certain guitar, but to answer your question initially, because some of that is just, oh man, they just mixed it weird or had weird speakers,
right.
But I would say that in order to improve some of these things might really mess up the history of music. But I will say that I would argue that if there's something if I could give one of my entity overdrive pedals, let's say, to but I know that he liked the sound, but if I could give it to him, if I could give it to Stevie Ray Vaughan,
nice.
Instead of him being so in love with that tube screamer.
Tube screamer, right? That's right.
And maybe let's hear what can you do with something that's
an interesting answer.
That gives you the full frequency range also, but he would still probably just do the same exact thing with it to get the EQ, because all it has is a tone. It doesn't have a 3-band. Plus, it's not like he didn't have access to anything. You look at somebody like Eddie Van Halen in 1977, he had that, or wait, I'm not sure if it was that year but he had that, the Big Boss, equalizer. Nobody was using like an 8-band EQ back then, you know what I mean, to dial in specific. But anyways, so I guess if I could, so you can't, I mean, these guys all knew what they were doing though. So, but if I could
but you're right though, because they were locked in and restricted to what was available on the market.
Right. They were very limited I mean, I'm sure he tried fuzz pedals. I'm sure he tried all these things, but I feel like the MXR and the Boss and the Ibanez overdrives, all these, they all had that really, but they were kind of designed for that, like when you need to boost to give you that, because they knew this was meant for the working guitarist in the
utilitarian
band. In the mix, you're not gonna. There's no need to have this tube screamer be high gain, because if you're playing on a Marshall or a Fender Bassman or like something that's just got like gain, then you're good. I was surprised to find that like some of the settings for like what was it? There was like some Megadeth album or something like that. They were talking about some Marshall thing that I was trying to figure out what, and they said that like basically he had the Marshall gain at like about 6.
Wow.
So the gain wasn't even up like all the way, but then the overdrive that they had was only at like I don't know, where the gain on that was only at like a 2.
Wow. Wow.
Or just to add that little extra tiny bit of, it wasn't to give tons of distortion, but if I, in my olden day, on my solid state days, I would have probably just had the volume and just stacked it and tried to kept stacking to get the high gain that I wanted, which again, I didn't have the experience of what to, the nuances of like these tube amps.
Right. Interesting.
So some of that comes to my lack of experience.
Nice segue into the next question. What's the best advice you could give someone starting out in the pedal design business?
Oh, pedal design business?
Yeah. Pedal creation. What's the best advice?
Yeah, try probably.
What is it? Something like if you look back on your progression and you like, oh, you know what? If I would have done this at the beginning, I'd be a lot better off now.
I would say try not to do everything all the through hole design from the start, right? Like try to do as much of it with the circuits. Like first of all, get as good as you can at like EagleCAD or KiCad or Altium, whatever you have access to for these for your circuit design programs, for schematics and PCB layout program. Get good at laying out the PCBs, but I would say forget about anything through hole as far as like your resistors, capacitors, unless they're like electrolytic, or whatever. But the customizable components, I'm sure at this point probably know about that already. But just, oh man, I spend way too much time in the beginning with all these, with just all the resistors and all the values and all the stuff just laying around and having to go through, and all the time I spent doing it's too much time, especially if you want to try to scale it all by yourself. The hopes for the future of being able to grow and maybe have the quantity. You want to have to actually assemble as little as possible. Most of it's the off-board wiring for like connecting the jacks, the foot switch, the whatever else, getting it into the the power thing, all this stuff. It ends up being, take a look at that site Guitar Pedal X. There's a lot of open, every pedal that the guy reviews. I think that with this blog he takes pictures of the inside also.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so it's you save yourself a lot of time, and you can probably charge less for pedals if it's
and get a good soldering iron.
Yeah, get a good. Yeah, I mean, I survived for a long time with that crappy one. I mean, but and it still works. It's up there as like a backup, but I was like, man, I just needed something better,
So while you're working, is it music or no music in the background? What do you prefer? Because I know that when I'm working on guitars, I'll put on jazz, classical, rock as background noise, but when I get down to soldering, I really need to think, and I just don't want background noise, and that's just my thing.
I'm listening to music or podcasts.
Okay.
And usually it's like a comedy podcast, so it's something where I don't have to be thinking. If I'm having to follow along with like an audio book, that might be a
right. That's right. Yeah.
Because then I'm like, oh crap, what did I just do? I need, So it's mainly
stuff your brain can wander in and out of at any given moment and still enjoy it.
Yeah, and when it is music, I like for it to be something that's a little more not constantly the same stuff that I've just been hearing over and over. So like probably from a band that I like, but I don't know their whole catalog, and then I'm just like, it's just playing through them. So it's like it's not like, oh, it's this, I've heard this a million times, and now I got to really worry about what I'm listening to. Because when I'm driving, oh man, the last thing I want is to hear the same album unless I really want to hear it that time. But it's like, if you have the choice,
that's right.
You don't want to just be stuck with that one CD that you've heard in the 1,000 times.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then, Bill, great. That segues into the final question.
Sure.
I ask everybody, you're stranded on a desert island. What 3 guitar songs would you put on your desert island mixtape?
Yeah, for on the mixtape, 3 guitar songs.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this counts as one song, I guess, but I think I would want to say "Shine on You, Crazy Diamond," right?
All the one through 6 or whatever.
1 through 6.
Okay.
Yeah. If that could be one song, that'd be cool. And I think for a second one, I think I would have to do something that's just because it was like around the, from when I was a kid getting into all this progressive rock stuff. I like that band Dream Theater. So there's one of the songs off their first off their second album, which was Images and Words, which I actually heard like a song on the radio and was like, oh, what is this? Back in like 92. And so there's that song called Learning to Live. Actually, it's the last song on the album. I'd probably want to have something else from the Black Keys. I think there's
nice.
there's off the same album, it was Gold on the Ceiling. There's it was the song and now I can't remember that. Now I'm like spacing on the name of it. It was like the song either right before or after.
What was the name of the album?
What was that called? El Camino?
Oh yeah, El Camino, sure.
Little Black Submarines.
Black Submarines. Okay,
I like
cool.
that track. I don't know why I thought I was thinking it was Little Black, and then I Little Sub, and then but I forgot it was Black. So Little Black Submarine.
Gotcha. That makes me wonder, when you are listening to music, do you ever? You probably dissect. Oh, they're probably playing through a da-da-da-da. I can probably tell that they've. You know what I mean? You're thinking about the effect pedals. Like, have you ever run into a tune where you're like, I can't figure out what the hell they're doing there? Because I'm sure now in the digital era too, you'd have to be pre-80s or pre-90s to be able to go, I think I can figure out what they're playing through right there.
Yeah, there was actually some difficult stuff. For a long time, I didn't know what they were doing on some stuff way back in the day. And I just had no idea like what they were doing. Some of it was like some settings and some weird pedals, and then and most of the time it was like a phaser or flanger or like a vocoder or some pitch thing or, but I think, what do they use? I think something that used to perplex me for a little while was one of those, what was it called? Harmonizers, right?
Yeah.
Those harmonizers were, because I think it was tough to get it to do, and I don't remember. I think you had to run through one of those digital ones, because otherwise you run into that octave problem from my.
Good point.
I think it has to have the fast sampling, so you'd have to find some of this late 80s, effects processors, early 90s effects processors for some of these. You could get these harmonizers.
Interesting.
Right. And they would kind of do what you wanted. There was a guitar solo on this one album, and I was like, what the hell is that? I think they were using a harmonizer laid on real thick with some weird like thick distortion or something.
Huh.
And it sounded super cool.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know how they were doing it. Or maybe it was like a synth pedal that was kind of doubled with the harmonizer with it or something. It was like
cool.
It was a weird thing, but it was just some guitar solo that wasn't like crazy or whatever. It sounded awesome.
Wow. Well, Bill, I want to thank you for your time, man. It's I know it's time is our most valuable asset. I wish you all the best in those great new designs that you have coming out.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to go on your site, and I think I'm going to get something. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, Bill from Humanoid FX, North Carolina guy, just like myself. So you're in Raleigh. Are you a Wolfpack fanatic?
I'm not a big sports fan anymore. I used to.
Okay.
I'm not from here originally.
Oh yeah, where are you originally from?
I grew up in Cleveland.
Okay.
I met my wife and went back to school and was living up there for years and years and years in the Philadelphia area.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So moved down here about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And my wife, she grew up here though. She's a Wolfpack fan.
There you go. I was waiting for it. You can't help it.
She went to yeah. So
it's pure osmosis. I moved from Alaska to North Carolina.
Oh my gosh, really?
So I moved to Chapel Hill.
Oh.
And I wasn't a college basketball. I could care less about basketball. But literally within a year, I was like worshiping Dean Smith and Tar Heel Blue and I Bleed Blue and with Raz Duke fans, and it's by pure osmosis. You just can't help it.
Wow, crazy!
It finds a way to creep into your blood for sure.
when did the guitar stuff happen for you? With all the, because you've been playing for a while, you got the Sears you talked about, and then you got a Strat, but then you also got this BC Rich behind you.
Well, these are client guitars. This guy's getting new pickups.
The Mockingbird,
and he wanted push-pull pots installed, so I'm doing that.
Sure.
Split coil. But guitar for me, geez, I was 10 years old when I got my first one, and the Sears guitar was 1980. Started getting electrified, and then I started finding out about jazz. And for the longest time, I was a Kiss, Black Sabbath guy. Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. It was the only way to go. But then suddenly I was like, man, Pat Metheny's doing, and Jeff Beck, and I think Jeff Beck and Hendrix were my gateway to jazz.
Sure.
Exploring different modulations and exploring the fretboard in a different way. And
I was lucky I got access to and exposed to some of those early guys, guitar guys from my brother, because my brother's actually a professional jazz musician.
Oh, well, there you go.
He's a saxophone. He's a saxophone guy, but he got me into Pat Metheny and John Scofield in the early mid '90s.
Well, Bill, again, I don't want to keep you any longer, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm a fan now, and I'll be following your Instagram and your YouTube channel and seeing what's next.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I like your channel too, and I didn't get it. These are longer. I got to listen to some more. I like it. Well, thank you so much.
All right, Bill. Thank you. Take good care. Bye-bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.